Tom was a quiet man who liked to spend time alone in the forest. He lived in a small town on the edge of the hills, where the streets were narrow and the air smelled of flowers in spring. Every weekend he carried his backpack and walked along the trails near his home. He liked the calm of the trees, the sound of birds, and the feeling of soft soil under his boots. One morning, Tom woke up earlier than usual. The sun had just risen, painting the sky with pink and gold. He drank a cup of tea, put on his sturdy boots, and grabbed his backpack. Today he wanted to explore a trail he had never walked before. He had heard from an old map that there were paths that led deep into the forest, far from the roads and houses. The air was crisp and fresh as Tom walked along the narrow trail. Leaves rustled under his feet, and the wind moved gently through the branches above. Birds chirped in the distance, and occasionally he saw small animals darting between the trees. Tom liked walking slowly, noticing every detail, the way the sunlight hit a spider's web, or the smell of wet earth after a small rain. After walking for almost an hour, Tom noticed the forest growing thicker. The trees were older here, their trunks wide and covered in moss. The path became less clear, and he had to step carefully over fallen branches and tangled roots. He was not afraid, but he felt a strange excitement. It was as if the forest itself was waiting to show him something hidden. Then he saw it. At first, he thought it was a shadow of a tall tree, but as he looked closer, he realized it was something made of metal. Between the thick trunks, a large structure rose above the forest floor. Tom's curiosity grew. He moved quickly but quietly toward it. As he got closer, he could see that it was a massive rusted radio mast, taller than any tree around. Its metal beams were old and corroded, and thick cables hung loosely, swinging slightly in the wind. Tom stopped for a moment to take it all in. He had read about old radio towers in history books, stories about communication networks built long ago, but he never imagined finding one hidden in a forest like this. The mast looked abandoned, yet it seemed powerful. He circled the structure slowly, noticing the rust patterns and the way sunlight reflected off the old metal. Near the base of the mast, Tom spotted something else. A small door was partly hidden by vines and leaves. The door was metal, its paint peeling from years of rain and sun. A padlock hung on it, rusted but still holding strong. Tom bent down and touched it. The metal was cold and rough, and he could feel years of neglect in its texture. A strange feeling ran through him. He felt like he had discovered a secret the forest had been keeping for decades. Part of him wanted to leave, to walk away and pretend he had not seen anything unusual. But another part, the part that loved adventure and mystery, told him to explore further. He looked around and saw a broken branch nearby. He used it to push aside some of the vines covering the door. The padlock looked old, and he could see that with the right tool it might break easily. He remembered the small crowbar in his backpack, a tool he always carried for emergencies. Tom took it out and studied the padlock carefully. After a few minutes of careful work, he managed to pry the padlock open. It cracked and fell to the ground, leaving the door free. Tom pushed it slowly. The door creaked loudly and a rush of musty, damp air escaped. He stepped back for a moment, covering his nose with his sleeve. The smell was strong, like wet metal and old paper. Tom switched on his flashlight. The beam revealed a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. Metal steps curved tightly in a spiral, and the walls were covered in dust and cobwebs. The air was cool and heavy, and Tom felt a small thrill of fear mixed with excitement. He had no idea what he would find below. Taking a deep breath, Tom began to descend the stairs carefully. Each step made a loud metallic echo that bounced off the walls. He held the railing tightly, moving slowly to avoid slipping on the rusted steps. As he went lower, the air became damper and the smell stronger. Tiny drops of water fell from the ceiling, and he stepped around small puddles on the floor. After several minutes, he reached the bottom of the staircase. The space was larger than he expected. It was a small underground room, its walls lined with old machinery. Metal panels, wires, and levers covered every surface. Some equipment still had faded labels in Russian. Papers were scattered on the floor, yellowed with age. Tom bent down to pick one up and read it. The handwriting was careful, with diagrams of signals and instructions for using the equipment. Tom's heart raced. He realized this mast was not just an old radio tower. It had been part of a hidden communication system, used for messages that few people ever knew about. He wondered how it had stayed hidden for so long. The forest had kept it secret, protecting it from the world. He moved carefully around the room, examining the equipment. Some of the machines had small screens that flickered weakly, showing broken lines and static. He could hear a faint hum, almost like the room itself was alive. Tom's mind filled with questions. Who had built this place? Why had they left it here? And what was it used for? Near the back of the room, Tom saw a small door partially covered by boxes and old wires. He bent down and moved the debris aside. The door was metal, just like the first one, and it led further into the underground structure. He could not see what was on the other side. The darkness beyond the door seemed to call him, inviting him to explore more. Tom paused for a moment. He felt a mixture of fear and excitement. He knew he should be careful. The structure was old and unstable. Rust could break at any moment, and he had no idea what he might find deeper inside. But his curiosity was stronger. Slowly, he reached out and turned the handle. The door creaked as it opened, revealing a narrow corridor lined with more old machinery. He stepped inside, flashlight in hand. Dust rose from the floor with each step, and the hum of electricity grew louder. The corridor twisted and turned, leading him deeper underground. Tom's mind raced with thoughts about the people who had built this place and the secrets it might hold. As he walked, he noticed more papers on the floor. Some were maps, some were instructions, and some were charts showing frequencies and signals. He picked one up and studied it. The writing was precise, technical, and careful. This was a place of science, of planning, and of secrets meant to be hidden. Tom realized he was standing in something very old, something powerful, and something that had been forgotten by the world. He moved forward carefully, his eyes wide with wonder. Every step brought him closer to discovering what had been kept secret for so many years. Tom knew that this was only the beginning of something incredible. The forest had led him here, and now he was ready to uncover its hidden story. Tom took a deep breath and stepped further into the corridor. The walls were cold and damp, and the faint hum of the machinery seemed to follow him as he moved. Every step he took echoed softly, bouncing off the metal walls and filling the underground space with a low, constant sound. He held his flashlight tightly, the beam slicing through the darkness and revealing cables that ran along the ceiling and floor. The corridor twisted and turned in ways that made it hard to keep track of direction. Every few steps he would stop and examine the equipment on the walls. Rusted panels had switches and dials, and some machines had small screens that flickered weakly. Although the electronics looked old, a few of them still showed faint lights, as if they had been waiting for someone to come back and use them. Tom noticed markings on the walls, symbols and numbers etched into the metal. Some were in Russian, others in a language he did not recognize. He crouched to take a closer look. The symbols seemed to be instructions or warnings, carefully written by someone who had spent hours working here. Tom realized that the people who had built this place had wanted it to be secret, but also usable if needed. He continued walking, careful not to touch the old wires. Some of them were thick and heavy, while others were thin and fragile. He imagined what it would have been like to work here, decades ago when this mast was new and powerful. The thought made him feel connected to the past. The people who had built this place had been careful, precise, and focused on something important. Tom wanted to know what it was. At the end of the corridor, he found another door. Unlike the first, this one had no lock, only a simple handle. Tom pushed it slowly. The hinges groaned and the door swung open to reveal a small room. The space was brighter than the corridor, though still dim. In the center stood a large console covered in dust. Wires ran from it into the walls and small screens flickered with faint green light. Tom approached the console. The labels were mostly in Russian, but he could make out some symbols and numbers. There were switches, buttons, and levers, all arranged in a careful pattern. It looked like a control center for the mast above. He ran his fingers lightly over the metal surface, feeling the cold and smoothness of the buttons. He wondered what it would have been like to press them, to send messages that could travel far across the world. On the floor, Tom noticed papers scattered like leaves. He bent down and picked one up. The paper was yellowed with age, and the handwriting was small but neat. It contained diagrams of signals, instructions, and what looked like coordinates. Some of the pages were marked with dates going back decades. Tom realized that this mast had been active long ago, and it had been part of a system that people had carefully hidden. As he looked through more papers, he discovered a folder tucked in a corner. It was thicker than the others and bound with string. Carefully, he opened it. Inside were notes about experiments with long-distance communication. Some diagrams showed towers similar to this one, while others showed maps with lines connecting distant locations. The notes described tests and experiments, messages sent across countries, and signals that few people could understand. Tom felt a thrill. He had stumbled upon something extraordinary. This was not just a relic. It was a place of knowledge, a secret that had been preserved for decades. He wondered how many people knew about it and why it had been left hidden in the forest. The thought made him feel both lucky and responsible. He knew he had found something that should be handled with care. He examined the room more carefully. There were boxes stacked in a corner, some open, some closed. Inside the open boxes, he found old devices, wires, and tools. Some looked like radios, others like measuring instruments. Tom realized that these items had been left here intentionally. Whoever had built this place had planned for it to remain hidden, but ready to use if needed. Tom moved toward a small door at the back of the room. It was partially blocked by boxes, but he could see that it led further inside. The door handle was cold and the metal felt solid. He opened it slowly, stepping into a narrow passage that descended even further underground. The hum of electricity grew louder and the air felt heavier. He could smell the scent of metal, dust, and something faintly sweet that he could not identify. The passage ended in another room, much larger than the others. In the center was a massive console with multiple screens, buttons, and levers. Wires ran across the floor and ceiling, connecting to machines along the walls. The room looked like it had been designed for long-term operation. Tom could see areas where workers might have stood or sat, controlling the machines and sending messages through the mast above. He noticed a stack of folders on a table nearby. Picking one up, he read notes about signal tests and communications. Some of the entries were in code, while others were written plainly. The notes described sending messages to faraway places, tracking signal strength, and adjusting equipment to ensure messages reached their destinations. Tom realized that this was more than a radio mast. It was a communication hub, designed to connect people across vast distances. As he explored, he found a small storage room attached to the main space. Inside were metal chests carefully locked and shelves filled with old supplies. Tom opened one of the chests and found stacks of papers, maps, and a few small devices. Some papers had coordinates, others had charts and numbers. It became clear that this mast had been part of a larger network, one that had been used for secret communications long ago. He noticed a small device on one of the shelves, a radio that was surprisingly intact. The green light on it flickered faintly as if it were alive. Tom picked it up carefully. The moment he touched it, he heard a faint crackle, like a whisper in the dark. The device seemed to respond to his presence. He felt a shiver of excitement mixed with caution. This was no ordinary radio. Tom set the radio down and continued examining the room. He wanted to understand everything before moving further. He looked at the walls, the machines, the papers, and the chests. Everything here had been left in a state that suggested it was meant to be discovered one day, carefully preserved. Whoever had worked here had taken great care to make sure their work would last, even if the world above forgot about it. He spent hours exploring, taking notes and examining the equipment. He imagined the people who had built this place, working quietly, sending messages that few would ever hear. The thought filled him with wonder. This forest had hidden a secret for decades, and now he was the first person in a long time to step inside. By the time he finally decided to leave, the sun outside was lower in the sky. He looked back at the rooms he had explored. The hum of the machinery was still faint, but it seemed calmer now. He realized he had only begun to uncover the secrets of this mast. There were layers of knowledge, experiments, and messages that he had not yet fully understood. Tom stepped back into the corridor, his mind full of questions. He knew he had found something important, something that could change how he understood the history of the forest and the people who had built this place. The thought made him both anxious and excited. He wanted to learn more, to follow the trail deeper into the underground maze. As he ascended the first staircase back to the forest floor, he felt a sense of connection with the past. This mast had been abandoned, hidden, and forgotten, yet it still held power, mystery, and knowledge. Tom knew that his adventure was just beginning. The forest had shared one of its secrets with him, and he would not forget the feeling of discovering something lost in time. When he finally stepped outside, the sunlight felt warm on his face. The massive rusted mast towered above the trees, quiet and still, but holding countless stories within its metal structure. Tom looked around, making sure he would remember the path back. The forest seemed alive, whispering as the wind moved through the leaves. He smiled, knowing that he would return. There was more to discover, more to understand, and more to explore. After returning from the underground rooms, Tom could not stop thinking about what he had discovered. The forest felt different now, as if it was holding its breath, waiting for him to return. He spent the night in his small cabin, replaying every detail in his mind. The massive rusted mast, the old machines, the papers with diagrams and coordinates, and the small radio that seemed alive. It all filled him with curiosity. He knew he had to go back and explore further. The next morning, Tom packed his backpack again with water, food, a flashlight, and his notebook. He made sure to carry extra batteries for the flashlight. The forest welcomed him silently as he walked along the path, sunlight filtering through the trees. Birds chirped above, but the forest felt quieter than usual, as if it knew that something important was about to be discovered. When he reached the mast, Tom paused for a moment, looking up at the towering structure. Its metal beams glinted in the morning light, and the dangling wires seemed like threads connecting it to the sky. He approached the small door at the base and noticed that the padlock was already broken from his previous visit. Carefully, he pushed the door open and stepped inside. The spiral staircase led him down again, and Tom felt a familiar thrill mixed with caution. The hum of the old machinery grew louder with each step. Dust rose from the floor as he moved, and the smell of metal and old paper surrounded him. This underground place felt alive in a strange way, as if it remembered the people who had worked here long ago. When he reached the first large room, he turned on his flashlight and began exploring more carefully. He had already examined much of this space before, but today he wanted to look at the details he might have missed. He studied the old consoles, the flickering screens, and the wires running across the walls. He realized that every piece of equipment was connected in a careful system, designed to transmit messages over long distances. Tom moved to the back of the room and opened the small door leading to the inner corridor. This area was darker than the others, and the hum of electricity was louder. He walked slowly, his flashlight illuminating walls filled with faded labels, diagrams, and symbols. Some were in Russian, others in a code he did not understand. He stopped frequently, taking notes in his notebook and sketching some of the symbols. At the end of the corridor, he found a larger room he had not fully explored before. In the center stood a massive console with multiple screens, buttons, and levers. Wires ran along the floor and ceiling, connecting to machines along the walls. It looked like a command center, designed for people to monitor and control signals from the mast above. Tom realized that this place had been important and powerful in its time. He approached one of the screens, which flickered weakly with green light. The screen showed broken lines and static, but he could see faint patterns forming. Tom ran his fingers over the buttons carefully. Some of them made soft clicks, and he noticed small lights responding to his touch. He realized that even after decades, the equipment was partially working. Tom turned to a stack of folders on a table nearby. He opened one and found detailed notes about long-distance communication experiments. Some pages had diagrams of towers like this one, connected by lines across maps. Others had descriptions of experiments, instructions for sending signals, and observations about signal strength. He read carefully, fascinated by the knowledge recorded here. One folder contained what looked like personal notes from the scientists who had worked in this mast. They wrote about their experiments with signals, trying to communicate over vast distances. Some entries were technical, describing frequencies and waves, while others were more personal, sharing their excitement and hopes for the project. Tom felt a connection with these people, imagining them working here silently, sending messages that few would ever know about. As he explored further, Tom noticed a small storage area. Inside, he found metal chests, boxes, and shelves filled with old devices. He opened a chest and discovered a collection of tapes, papers, and small machines. Some were radios, others were measuring instruments. He realized that these devices were part of the experiments recorded in the folders. Each item had been carefully preserved, as if someone knew it might be discovered someday. Among the papers, Tom found a folder labeled Experiment Logs. The pages were filled with detailed accounts of tests conducted over many years. Some logs described successful transmissions, while others recorded failures. The scientists had tried to reach places far away, some even across continents. The precision and care in their work amazed Tom. He could see that this mast had been more than a simple radio tower. It was a hub of innovation and secret knowledge. Tom then noticed a small radio device on a shelf. The green light on it flickered faintly even in the dim room. He picked it up carefully. The moment he touched it, he heard a faint crackle, like a whisper in the dark. The radio seemed alive, responding to his presence. He adjusted the dial slowly, and for a moment he thought he heard a voice, speaking in a language he did not understand. His heart raced. The radio was active even after so many years. Tom realized that this mast might still be capable of sending messages. The thought was thrilling and a little frightening. He wondered who, if anyone, might still receive these signals. He placed the radio back on the shelf carefully and continued exploring, wanting to understand the full mystery before experimenting with it. He moved to the corner of the room and found another set of papers, marked with dates and coordinates. Some described locations nearby, while others pointed to faraway lands. Tom realized that this mast had been part of a larger network, connecting places that most people would never know existed. The thought of how much history and knowledge was hidden here filled him with awe. While examining the walls, Tom found small compartments built into the metal. Inside were more papers and old instruments. Some were measuring tools, others were parts of radios. It was clear that the scientists had planned everything carefully, leaving equipment in places that could be used if someone returned. Tom marveled at their foresight. Hours passed as he explored every corner. He took careful notes, sketched diagrams, and documented what he could. The more he learned, the more he understood that the mast was not abandoned in the usual sense. It had been left hidden, preserved, and ready to be discovered. Tom felt like he had stepped into a time capsule, one that held a secret world of knowledge waiting for someone to uncover. By late afternoon, Tom decided to rest for a while. He sat on an old chair near the console, looking at the flickering screens. The faint hum of electricity was calming now. He thought about the people who had worked here, about the experiments, and about the messages sent across the world. Their dedication and intelligence inspired him. He realized that this discovery was not only about the past but also about understanding how knowledge could survive through time. Tom made a plan. He would return home to study his notes and organize the information he had collected. Then he would come back to explore deeper parts of the mast, perhaps even investigate the faint signals that the equipment still produced. He knew that the real mystery was waiting, hidden somewhere in the maze of rooms, wires, and devices. Before leaving, he carefully closed the small doors and ensured that nothing was disturbed. The mast had remained hidden for decades, and he wanted to respect the place. As he climbed the spiral staircase to the forest floor, he felt a mixture of excitement and responsibility. He had discovered a secret, and it was up to him to learn it carefully. When he finally stepped outside, the sunlight was softer, casting long shadows across the forest. The rusted mast towered above the trees, silent and imposing, holding stories within its metal beams. Tom looked around, feeling connected to the forest and the past. He knew that the next time he returned, he would uncover more, and perhaps finally understand the full mystery that lay hidden inside. For now, he walked back through the forest with a sense of purpose. Every step reminded him that some discoveries are meant to be explored slowly. The forest had given him a glimpse into a forgotten world, and Tom knew he would return to unlock more of its secrets. The mast was more than metal and wires. It was a story waiting to be told, and he was determined to uncover it. Tom could not sleep that night. His mind kept replaying the strange hum of the mast, the old equipment, and the faint green light of the small radio that seemed alive. He wondered if he had seen everything, or if there were deeper secrets hidden beneath the forest floor. By morning, he had made a decision. He would return and explore further, prepared for whatever he might find. The forest greeted him with the familiar scent of pine and fresh earth. Sunlight filtered through the tall trees, making patterns on the ground. Tom moved quickly but carefully, feeling a mixture of excitement and caution. He carried his backpack with tools, a notebook, food, and water. Today he wanted to explore the parts of the mast that he had not yet fully examined. When he reached the base of the mast, he paused for a moment. The metal structure loomed above him, rusted but strong. He opened the small door at the bottom and descended the spiral staircase slowly. The familiar hum of electricity grew louder with each step, and he felt a thrill of anticipation. The underground maze of corridors and rooms awaited him. Tom began with the larger inner rooms. He had explored these before, but today he wanted to look at every detail carefully. He ran his hands over the consoles and flickering screens, noticing things he had not seen before. Some of the buttons had labels that were almost unreadable, but he could make out numbers and symbols that seemed important. As he moved through the corridors, he reached the small storage area he had discovered last time. He carefully examined the metal chests and boxes, looking for anything new. One chest caught his attention. It was locked, but the metal looked worn and fragile. Tom used his crowbar carefully and pried it open. Inside, he found stacks of papers, tapes, and small devices. Some of the papers were maps, while others had coordinates and charts. Tom flipped through the folders, his eyes widening as he realized what he had found. One folder was labeled Experiment Logs. The pages were filled with detailed notes about communication tests. Some experiments had succeeded while others had failed. The notes described attempts to send signals to faraway places, even across continents. The scientists had been working on something much larger than a simple radio network. In the corner of the storage room, Tom noticed a small metal box that was different from the others. It was clean compared to the rusted surroundings, and it had a small handle. Curious, he opened it carefully. Inside, he found a device unlike anything he had seen before. It was small and rectangular, with buttons, dials, and a screen that glowed faintly. It seemed modern compared to the rest of the equipment. Tom picked up the device carefully. The screen flickered to life, showing lines of code and a map with blinking dots. His heart raced. This device was still active even after decades. He pressed a few buttons slowly, trying to understand its functions. The device responded, showing signals moving across the map, connecting different points in distant locations. He realized that the mast was not just a communication hub. It was part of a network that had been designed to connect places nobody in the town had ever heard of. The equipment was advanced for its time, and it had been preserved perfectly. Tom could not believe what he was seeing. It was like stepping into a secret world of knowledge hidden beneath the forest. Tom carefully set the device down and looked around the room again. There were more chests, boxes, and shelves, all filled with papers, devices, and old instruments. Some of the items looked like radios, while others seemed to be measuring tools or recording devices. He realized that the scientists had left everything in a way that someone could come back and understand their work. He spent hours examining the papers and devices. Some of the logs described experiments that were almost unbelievable. The scientists had tested sending signals to remote locations, adjusting equipment to ensure messages reached their destinations, and recording data with precision. It was clear that they had been meticulous in their work, leaving a trail for anyone who might discover it in the future. While exploring, Tom found a folder that seemed different from the others. It was labeled Confidential. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it. Inside were detailed reports about a project that had been carried out in secret. The notes described a system designed to reach distant places without relying on ordinary technology. The scientists had been experimenting with signals that could travel far beyond normal limits. Tom felt a mixture of excitement and awe. He realized that he was standing in a place where knowledge had been carefully preserved, hidden from the world for decades. The scientists had left instructions, devices, and logs, all meant to ensure that their work could continue even if the world above forgot about it. Then, in the back of the room, Tom noticed something that made his heart skip a beat. A small, heavy door was hidden behind a stack of boxes. Unlike the other doors, it had no handle. It looked like it had been sealed for a long time. Tom pushed the boxes aside and examined the door. There was a small latch, but it was rusted and difficult to move. With careful effort, he managed to open the latch. The door creaked as it swung open, revealing a small chamber inside. The room was darker than the others, but his flashlight revealed rows of old machines connected by thick wires. At the center of the room was a pedestal with a large device on it. The device glowed faintly, and strange symbols were etched into its surface. Tom approached slowly, his curiosity stronger than his caution. He examined the device carefully. It looked like a machine designed to receive or send signals, but it was much larger and more complex than anything he had seen before. The symbols on it were strange, not like the Russian labels or numbers he had seen earlier. They seemed almost like codes or instructions. As he studied the device, he noticed that a small screen on its surface was active. It displayed lines of text, numbers, and symbols. Tom realized that the device was still operational. The hum of electricity filled the chamber, louder here than anywhere else in the mast. He felt a shiver run down his spine. This was more than a simple radio. It was something powerful, something the scientists had kept hidden for a reason. Tom carefully touched the screen. The text changed, showing patterns and signals moving across the display. He could see connections forming, almost like a map of signals traveling across the world. His mind raced. He realized that this device had been part of a project far more advanced than ordinary radio communication. The scientists had built a system capable of reaching distant places in ways nobody else could. He spent hours in the chamber, examining the machine and the surrounding equipment. Every detail told a story of careful planning, advanced knowledge, and secrecy. The more he explored, the more he understood that the mast was not abandoned. It had been left here with a purpose, preserved to continue functioning even if the world above forgot. By the time Tom finally left the chamber, he felt a mixture of awe and responsibility. He had discovered something extraordinary, something that had been hidden for decades. The forest around the mast seemed quiet, as if respecting the secrets it held. Tom climbed the spiral staircase slowly, looking back at the glowing lights of the chamber. He knew that he had only begun to uncover the mysteries hidden within the mast. When he stepped outside, the sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows across the forest floor. The rusted mast stood tall and silent, but now Tom understood that it held knowledge, power, and secrets waiting to be revealed. He took a deep breath, feeling both excitement and caution. There was more to discover, and he knew that the next step would lead him even deeper into the mystery of the mast. Tom returned to the mast early the next morning. The forest was calm, almost silent, as if it too was waiting for him to uncover the remaining secrets. The massive rusted structure loomed above the trees, silent and imposing. Today he felt certain he would discover something that would explain the purpose of all the equipment and devices he had seen in the underground rooms. He opened the small door at the base and descended the spiral staircase carefully. The hum of electricity grew louder with each step, vibrating through the metal stairs. Tom's heart raced with anticipation. Every corridor, every flickering screen, every stack of papers from before had been leading him to this moment. He was ready to uncover the truth hidden inside the mast. As he reached the large inner rooms, he noticed a faint green glow coming from the hidden chamber he had discovered yesterday. He approached it cautiously, pushing aside the boxes that had partially blocked the small, heavy door. The room inside was dimly lit by the glow of the large device at the center. Tom stepped in, holding his flashlight, though the light barely seemed necessary with the device already illuminating the space. He examined the device again, feeling its cold metal surface under his hands. The symbols etched into it were intricate, unlike anything he had seen before. Some were mathematical, others looked like coded instructions. On the small screen, lines and dots moved in patterns, forming connections across a digital map. Tom realized this device was not only receiving signals but also tracking something invisible, yet powerful. His eyes scanned the room carefully. Along the walls he found additional consoles connected to the main device. Each had papers, small radios, and recording instruments. Some of the papers had charts with timestamps. Others had coordinates of locations scattered across the world. The scientists had documented every test, every signal, and every result meticulously. Tom felt as though he was standing inside a laboratory frozen in time. He turned back to the main device. On one side, a small drawer was partially open. Inside, he found a folder labeled Final Experiments. Tom's hands trembled slightly as he opened it. The notes inside described a project far more advanced than any ordinary radio mast. The scientist had been testing signals that could transmit not only data, but also images and messages instantaneously over long distances. They had called it a long-reach communication system, and the project was so secret that only a few people had ever known about it. As he read through the folder, Tom discovered references to strange occurrences. The scientists had written about devices receiving signals that seemed impossible. Some messages included coded instructions, while others appeared to contain information from unknown sources. They had documented strange patterns in the signals, almost as if the mast itself had become intelligent, responding in ways the scientists could not fully explain. Tom's curiosity grew. He carefully studied the screen on the device. The lines of code shifted, forming new patterns. A blinking dot appeared on the map, moving from one location to another. He followed its path, realizing that the device was actively sending or receiving signals even now, decades after the mast had been abandoned. The power of the system had not faded. Then, he noticed something that made him stop in his tracks. On the screen, a small window opened, showing an image. It was faint, blurry, but unmistakable. A photograph of the forest outside the mast taken from above. Tom's eyes widened. The device was not only transmitting signals, it was capturing images from the world outside. Somehow the scientists had built a system capable of recording its surroundings and sending information across the network. Tom felt a chill run down his spine. The mast was no ordinary radio tower. It was a sophisticated surveillance and communication hub, hidden in the forest to keep its abilities secret. The experiments had not just been about long-distance signals. They had been about creating a system that could observe, record, and communicate with precision, even from a remote location. He carefully explored the rest of the room. In a corner, he found a small cabinet with drawers containing more papers, tapes, and small devices. One tape was labeled "Test Transmission, Do Not Remove." Tom inserted it into an old player he found nearby. The device crackled to life, and a voice came through in Russian. Though he did not understand the language, the tone was serious and urgent. He realized that these were recordings of the scientists' experiments, and they had left them to be discovered only by someone capable of understanding the system. Tom felt a mix of awe and responsibility. The mast held not only the history of advanced scientific work, but also a technology that could still function today. If misused, it could be powerful, but in the right hands, it was an extraordinary piece of knowledge. He realized that he had stumbled upon something far beyond ordinary history or exploration. As he studied the main device again, he noticed a small panel labeled Activation Log. Opening it, he found records of all tests conducted over the years, showing when the device had been active and what kind of signals it had sent or received. Some entries were recent, showing that the mast had detected signals even in modern times, though it had remained hidden from everyone above ground. Tom realized that the mast had never truly been inactive. It had been sleeping, waiting for someone like him to return. He carefully turned some dials, following instructions from the notes he had read. The device responded, and the screen showed more detailed patterns. He could see that it was capable of linking with other parts of the network, perhaps other hidden masts around the world. The scientists had built something that could still function, a communication system that could connect continents without anyone knowing. Tom realized he had to be careful. The discovery was extraordinary, but it was also fragile. The mast had survived decades of neglect, but it could be damaged easily. He documented everything in his notebook, making sketches, writing observations, and noting the functions of each device. Every detail mattered. Hours passed as he explored the chamber and the surrounding rooms. He discovered more devices, each with its own purpose. Some measured signals, others recorded transmissions, and a few seemed to be prototypes that had never been fully tested. Every item told a story of careful planning, scientific curiosity, and secrecy. Finally, Tom sat down on an old chair, exhausted but exhilarated. He looked at the glowing device in the center of the room. It was still active, still sending and receiving signals. He realized that the mast was not only a relic of the past but a living system, capable of interaction even now. He felt a deep respect for the people who had built it, and a sense of responsibility for what he had discovered. He knew he could not remove the device or the papers. They had been preserved carefully for decades, and their power and knowledge needed to remain intact. Tom decided that he would return home, study his notes, and plan his next visit. He wanted to understand the full potential of the mast, but he also wanted to protect it from misuse. As he climbed the spiral staircase back to the forest floor, the sunlight felt warm on his face. The rusted mast stood tall and silent above the trees, holding secrets that few could ever imagine. Tom looked at it with admiration and caution. The forest around him was calm, the birds singing softly, as if acknowledging the hidden marvel that lay beneath the earth. Tom walked back through the forest slowly, reflecting on what he had seen. The mast had revealed its mystery, showing him technology, experiments, and knowledge that had been hidden for decades. He felt a sense of fulfillment, but also an understanding that some secrets were too powerful to share recklessly. By the time he reached his cabin, he had made a decision. He would continue exploring the mast carefully, document everything he discovered, and protect the hidden system. The mast had changed his life, showing him a world of science, mystery, and discovery that existed beneath the forest, invisible to everyone else. Tom knew that this was only the beginning. The mast held many more secrets, and he was determined to uncover them one by one. The forest had shared its hidden treasure with him, and now he carried the responsibility to explore it wisely, respecting the past while learning for the future.